country that's truly iconic in motorcycling folklore. A vast, extreme, but totally enthralling land that's home to some of the greatest riding on the planet. Aboard my Harley Street Glide, I've planned a route of some 6,000 kilometres from Sydney down to Melbourne, and then up to head west across the infamous Nullarbor Plain to Journey's End in Perth on the west coast. So far, the Australia I've experienced has been something to savour. Glorious roads, sublime scenery, fascinating wildlife, and a host of locals who've welcomed me with open arms. I'm nearing the halfway point of my ride of a lifetime, arriving last night in a small nowhere kind of a town called Quorn, about 250 miles north of Adelaide. This one-horse town is my gateway to one of the harshest and loneliest terrains in the world, the Australian outback. Quorn once delighted in the riches derived from the convergence of Australia's rail network, but now, alas, with the advent of the roads, that's all become a distant memory. Beautiful to briefly be a part of, but probably a very harsh environment to make a living. Well, this is Monday morning, and it's Monday rush hour in Quorn. Not a lot going on, but what a great place this is. Now today we're heading off to another little small town called Kimber, which is about 120 miles away. But before then, I've got an appointment with the doctor. Heading out of Quorn to only do about 50 clicks to Port Augusta. It's all smiles in the saddle. This is the Australia I came for. The feelings of loneliness, warmth, and most importantly to us bikers, individuality, complete my contentment. It's all too easy to forget that this beautiful landscape can sometimes challenge your very existence. There's one service that people living in the remotest parts of Australia can't do without. It is the Royal Flying Doctors. The Royal Flying Doctors is unique to Australia. As well as here in Port Augusta, there are another 20 bases around the country, using 53 planes that helped last year a staggering 270,000 patients get medical help fast. Phil is in charge here at Port Augusta.
Flying Doctor Service has been in existence for over 80 years. Prior to that there were no medical services delivered to Outback and a lot of rural Australia.
Oh, so what happened if you got, bitten by a snake out there, or you got hit by a car? Nothing at all. You just take your chances.
If you're in an Outback, Hope Farmstead or whatever, do you have your own landing strip?
Yeah. And where do you land?
All the stations have constructed their own landing strips. It's a vital link for those people to the rest of the world.
So if I'm crossing the Nullarbor,
probably the biggest threat travelling the Nullarbor is animals that might be on the road, and certainly I would recommend not to travel at night time or at dusk. There could be sheep as well, and
so I'll be alright though, won't I, Phil?
Yeah, stay away from the sheep.
Yeah.
You're from New Zealand, aren't you?
Yeah, no, I'm from London. But do you know what they call a sheep tied to a lamppost in Wales?
No.
A leisure centre. To many, what I'm about to ride would be daunting. Some 1,500 kilometres of pure and unfettered wilderness. But to me, the senses you get in touch with riding a road like this is what life is all about. In this modern world plagued by health and safety directives doled out by people who were bullied at school, conformity and mediocrity is now the norm. Here, in the hostility of this landscape, I take my own chances and make my own decisions. That's why I ride a motorcycle. If it was safe, I wouldn't do it. Hey, there's another kindred spirit. Good luck to you, my friend. Well, this is it, man. The Australian outback. And if you like straight roads, well, that's a result, because we've got about 1,500 kilometres of these kind of roads. Quite incredible to think that, isn't it? The minute you get out of Port Augusta, you kind of enter the outback, and your friends really are these things, these road trains coming down here. I tell you what, man, you need to watch out for these things because they are fast. Just check this out. Now, on this stretch of road, just down to Ceduna, they can only have 2 trailers. But after Ceduna, across the Nullarbor, they can have 3 trailers, which means they must be, I mean, I don't know how many feet long, but be really careful overtaking them. But isn't this environment just quite incredible? It makes you feel so small, just like Death Valley, so humble. And we need a dose of that in the Western world, eh? It's only an hour or so's ride to my night stop in a little town called Kimber. Funny how when you're riding such straight roads, little things amuse, like odd-named towns, or realising that my cameraman Luke must see the whole of a country backwards. Either way, as evening approaches, Australia's insects are starting heading out for a night on the town. So up with the scarf before a fat lad makes a mess of the beard. I guess today had to stop sometime, and alas, it's now as I ride into Kimber. As morning breaks over Kimber, I'm greeted by a giant statue of a parrot called a galah. Kimber isn't exactly buzzing, but how could it be? There's only 636 inhabitants. Now, Kimber's famous actually for a couple of things. The first thing is it is actually the marker for exactly halfway across Australia from Sydney to Perth, which is quite alarming because we've been on the road for 2 weeks and we're only halfway across. But the other thing Kimber's famous for is it's one of the driest places in the world that they actually harvest and grow wheat. Apart from that, I don't know too much more about it, but I do know a man who does. And here he is. Jeff is Kimber's local policeman. In Kimber, how big is the police force?
Here, it's just me, one person.
Okay.
Covering a town of probably 700 people.
So there's no one else to help you?
No, not within 45 minutes.
But obviously there are certain situations where you might need help quickly. How does that work?
By having a good rapport and hopefully your community will back you up. If there's a fight at the hotel, there'll be locals there to give me a hand.
Being a police officer out here, you have to earn the respect even more of the local community.
Certainly.
Otherwise you're in deep doo.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you got to have your community behind you. Join in with their activities and be part of the community. And then they try and balance that fine line between being with them and be the policeman.
A lot of people talk to me about the wildlife and close encounters with them.
Kangaroos are everywhere out there. They jump straight across the road and you don't have much time at all. I've hit many in my car and the police car, and birds around this area, galahs. You get out there and you get hit in the face with a bird, and it's going to knock off your bike.
Being hit in the face by a bird is a very unpleasant experience, but fortunately I split up with her years ago. I have though seen loads of dead kangaroos peppering the hard shoulder. The trick is to pay special attention when the carcasses are new, as that means they're still in the vicinity. If they're old and smelly, then happy days, they've moved on. Suddenly though, something incredibly rare appears at the side of the road, a gas station.
Now look, out here, okay, if you see a petrol station, just top up, that's the key. So we're going to do about 200 miles now to Ceduna, and then after Ceduna, we really are seriously in the wilderness.
This never-ending stretch of road is called the Eyre Highway, named after a chap called Edward John Eyre, who was the first explorer to cross the Nullarbor Plain between 1840 and 1841. Incredibly, he set out on foot, but from the comfort of my sofa, the idea of walking it doesn't bear thinking about. The stunning scenery flashes by, and as ever, riding this kind of terrain, I feel compelled to pull over for no reason at all.
I feel like I'm in a postcard saying, "Come to Australia." It's not bad for a lay-by, is it, huh? Well, the flies are a bit bad, but that's the only bad thing about it. Man, I'm having a ball. If you're into cruising a big bike on big roads, I don't think there's anywhere like this in the world. Perhaps the American deserts are close. But my word, is this fun, huh? You know, I am worried about your wildlife coming out onto the road, and I thought that perhaps the best thing to do is to stay in the middle of the road as best I can, so if anything does run out from either side, I've got the best possible chance of actually avoiding it or seeing it come out. If I'm too close to one edge and it comes out, I've got nowhere to go.
The bike, time to put my feet up and immerse myself in the late afternoon sunshine. The last 80 clicks to Ceduna is yet another quite divine experience. As I ride into Ceduna, there is a slight chill in the air, but I guess that's just the sun starting to go down. Surely it couldn't spell rain. Next morning though, it certainly does.
There is a serious thunderstorm raging. It is torrential rain. But also, and more importantly to me, if I get caught in this further out in no man's land, the wind is horrific and will probably knock me off the bike. So probably a good indication of potentially what is to come.
As Ceduna is right on the southern coast, the weather conditions are prone to change in an instant. So as quickly as it came, the storm has now for the moment relented, allowing me a little wander round the town. Ceduna does have the air of being on the edge of civilization, and so it should. The next town heading west is about 1,500 kilometers away. This feeling of isolation is accentuated as the storm now threatens once more, but braving the inclement weather, I take the Harley off-road to explore a little further. All the way along this coastline, one industry proliferates, and that is the production of oysters. This is Astrid's Oysters on Denial Bay, one of the biggest oyster growers in the region. Craig's the governor.
Is this the capital of oyster production in Australia here?
Absolutely. We like to think so.
And why is that? Is it because of the waters here?
It's really good water, yes. It's pristine water, straight off the Southern Ocean here, so yeah, couldn't get much cleaner.
So your oysters are just out there, out to shore, are they?
Yes. It's about 100 metres off the beach. Yeah, just straight out across the road and we're there. Yeah, it's fairly convenient. We do have a lot of water further out, to see about 20 kilometres on the edge of the island, St Peter's Island. They start off in that calmer waters here in the nursery area, and then when they grow big enough we grade them, take them out to the island in different baskets of course, and they're there to grow a bit better and fatten up as they go.
Is it true that the bigger perhaps the oyster, the better they taste, or nothing like that?
I've heard the other way around. The smaller the sweeter, but I think a lot of it is that the bigger they are, the bigger the muscle, and so the chewier they tend to be. They appear to be chewier. But generally the meat should be much the same.
Okay, so perhaps the smaller could be the better if you don't like chewy muscle.
And if it's right, if you're a chewer and not a swallower, go for the smaller oysters. If you swallow, you want a small one as well, because you don't want to gag.
The oysters being graded here for sale are supposedly some of the finest grown in Oz, and if I'm really honest, I loathe them. So after lots of grief from Craig to try them, I've lied horribly and stitched producer Hamish up to take one for the team.
Go on, Hamish. Very salty.
Yeah, really salty. Really nice though.
That's it.
That was beautiful.
I can understand how they can be a delicacy, but not for me. It's a shame I'm allergic to seafood.
Outside, the storm is raging again, but as I ride back to town, the sunshine slowly returns, and it's time to prepare myself for what lies ahead. 1,500 kilometres of nothing between here and a town called Norseman.
Ceduna is the last town before Norseman. Now there are, as we go, supposedly, roadhouses to stay the night and petrol stations every 200 kilometres across the Nullarbor Plain. So you're not completely out of touch, but if you're riding, may I suggest just a couple of items to keep you going if the worst is going to happen to you. Now the first thing, obviously, are these puncture repair kit. To my mind, the best thing that you can have on a bike. Now next, that's a fuel pump, right? So consequently you go and squeeze petrol out of a car or some passing other vehicle you could siphon stuff out. So that's a really good useful thing. Now my other little luxury is one of these, right? It's a sat phone. So basically I could get coverage anywhere in the world. Now I know it's a bit of a luxury, but it costs about 10 quid a day or something like that. And it's good to have just as safety. In the evening, the sun's going to burn out your eyes. So the way to combat that is stick that on underneath your crash helmet, and it should be happy days. Either way, man, you can't prepare for everything, but that's probably a relatively good start. So there's nothing for it now, rather than dribbling along. Let's just get on the road to nowhere.
Rolling out of Ceduna, I'm so excited to at last be riding this road into the unknown. This is the start of surely one of the greatest road trips on Earth. I've got about 180 kilometres of absolutely nothing before my first taste of roadside living at a place called Numdrew. Immediately though, I'm learning a whole lot about me and my relationship with this terrain. The storms flare up all around me. The road trains whistle past, and when the rain and hail does come my way, it's accompanied by the Nullarbor's infamous winds.
Well, I'm pretty glad to see Numdrew, I have to say. The wind is awesome. It's fine, but just coming into Numdrew, these last 5 kilometres, we sort of headed up, got a crosswind, man. Well, that's quite hairy. So look, okay, you got to look out for these road trains that are massive. The downdraft is pretty bad. The wind's bad. Got a few more showers on the way. Plus you got kangaroos and wombats. Whew. I think that's enough excitement for one day.
As morning breaks over the Nundrew Motel, I'm woken by the thunder of the road trains, like vast beings growling along the highway and grumbling round the car park. The wind is unrelenting, but at least the rain has passed. This place is truly living on the edge.
If you want wilderness, this is it. Now this road, and when you're travelling here, your lifeline are these things, which are the roadhouses. The problem is with these roadhouses though, is they haven't got much competition.
So consequently the whole air of the place is pretty run down. But I guess that's also because help in the form of a handyman is days away. You would think that the person who runs a motel like this would be a hairy hard-nut Australian, but not a bit of it. It's a girl from Scotland called Rachel.
Rachel, what's it like here?
Truly wonderful.
Is it really?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot more opportunities to kind of appreciate nature and life, and I just feel that's what Australia is all about. It's not about being in Bondi Beach and just spending your time in pubs and nightclubs and living it up. And I just find being out here going wombat hunting is true Australia.
Wombat hunting?
Yes.
What do you go hunting with?
Aboriginals from Yalta. So yeah, go out hunting for kangaroos, wombat, sleepy lizard.
Do you?
Yes, absolutely. Now that's something you couldn't do anywhere, and you would not do that in the city. So that's to me why I find that's truly like Australia, and that's why it's nice to be in Outback.
So you're from Scotland. How did you end up running this place?
Just working and travelling through.
And what are the problems here running a place like this?
Mainly just living in a remote area. You can't have access to things if you have any water leaks, if you have problems with your electricity and so on. You don't necessarily have access to where you would if you were in a larger city.
Forgive me.
Yep.
Right. But a girl like you,
yes,
out here, running this place.
I know, who would have thought it?
Is there something in you that makes you want to do stuff like this?
Yes, because I want to rebel. I want to be slightly different, not just following the typical pattern. Yeah, I do feel it's just something that I just want to do because it's something a little bit different, and it excites me.
This landscape is daunting enough for me, but some fellow travellers could be described as fearless, or even totally raving.
Now look, right, you think it's crazy riding from Sydney to Perth on a motorbike. Evan and Joe here are doing it on bicycles. Why are you doing it on a bicycle?
Blame this man.
It's completely my fault. I thought it would be a nice little idea to challenge ourselves, really.
Yeah.
How long have you been on the road?
We've been on the road for three weeks and a day.
Yeah.
And we've got another month to do.
Yeah.
For you guys, how are you coping with this wind out on the plane? I can't believe it.
If it's behind you, it's a complete blessing. If it's in front of you, you quite frankly, you don't want to be in it. I had a day, I was an 85 kilometre day with about a 15-20 kilometre headwind, and I just got off and walked the last 8 kilometres because I just couldn't hack anymore. Right? I wasn't getting anywhere.
Now be honest with me, right? Have you thought of getting a lift with anybody?
Big time. Every time we're on the road and there's a caravan that drives past, I think to myself, shall we?
Yeah.
Quite often caravanners will pull up and offer us cups of tea, and we just think, not really keen on tea, but I'd love to jump in your car and get a lift down the road if possible.
It may be September and the start of spring, but I'm resigning myself that this inclement weather, for the time being at least, is here to stay. Passing another rather over-exuberant loony on a bicycle, this relentless road and never-ending horizon continues to captivate. But soon I become aware that it's been at least half an hour or so since I saw the last tree.
Now, even though to me, right, crossing this whole route is construed, in my view, as the Nullarbor Plain, actually the Nullarbor is only about 50 kilometres of the route, and we're standing in it. Now, these are ancient Aboriginal lands, and this is the tip of the Nullarbor, if you see what I mean, that we cut through, and it actually fans out into northern Australia. And Nullarbor means a treeless plain.
My ride across it may be a measly 50 kilometres, but the Nullarbor Plain to the north stretches out to cover some 200,000 square kilometres. The explorer John Eyre, when confronted by it, described the Nullarbor as a hideous anomaly, a blot on the face of nature, the sort of place one gets into in bad dreams. And on first impressions he's right. Cold, windswept and completely barren. But that's what makes it, for me, such an absolute treat. This loneliness, this isolation is to me addictive. The landscape lends itself to reflection, to an understanding of self and individuality, unattainable in an urban environment. It's a time to relish being rather than existing.
God, beautiful. There's not much point in doing the other one, really. It's exactly the same as that one. You do get quite mesmerised, I think, by the road. People say, oh, you know, you really want to watch out, you know, because you're just going to get sort of just taken in by the white lines and all this kind of stuff. Well, no, drivel. It is unbelievable here. You know, to ride a motorcycle along this road is something oh so special for me.
Riding on though, with the warmth of the sun returning, the Nullarbor can lull you into a false sense of security.
Well, I think the Nullarbor just got me there, really. What I'm calling the Nullarbor nods. I did fall asleep briefly then, and I sort of opened my eyes after a split second. Oh, blimey. Oh dear. Anyway, now look, right, check these views out, huh? It's sometimes odd to imagine you're actually riding literally about a mile away from the actual coast and this wonderful sea.
This stretch of shoreline is called the Great Australian Bight. The azure blue waters of the Southern Ocean caressing the colossal cliffs are the perfect backdrop to a wonderful natural phenomenon. Through the winter, the Bight becomes one of the breeding grounds for the southern right whale. These majestic animals, nearly hunted to extinction until the early 20th century, were called right whales purely because they were the right whales to hunt. Fortunately now, however, their numbers are very much on the increase. Leaving the whales behind, I'm back on the bike for about 200 miles to the border with Western Australia. There is quite simply nothing now until my night stop just the other side of the border in a place called Eucla. One thing's for sure, to do this trip on anything less than a big cruiser and you'll be in trouble. You just have to be here to understand the sheer size of the landscape you're up against. No bedtime bike magazine is going to really enlighten you. All too quickly, the border with Western Australia arrives. If you're passing this way, make sure you've got rid of all your fruit and vegetables, otherwise these guys will take them off you to prevent alien insects infecting their agriculture. As the sun drops on the Nullarbor, the beauty of this land intensifies. Alas, with the long shadows of Magic Hour accompanying me, it's only a mere 20 kilometres from the border to my digs for the night in Eucla.
Well, what a day that was. Beautiful, man. This Nullarbor Plain, this road, is something that I'll remember forever.
Next morning the sun beats down and the Eucla Motor Hotel has made for a very agreeable night's rest. The sign in the car park, however, underlines the distances still to travel to civilization.
Eucla is actually a much nicer stop than Nundrew, as far as accommodation is concerned and all that kind of stuff. Interestingly, this morning, you get sort of welcomed by these posters over here promoting towns like Esperance and Norseman, both of which are about as far as London is from Aberdeen. That just gives you an idea of the scale of the mileage here. And if you thought it was really, really tough out here, it's nothing to what it was like in the 1880s.
In the late 19th century, if you were pioneering or crazy or desperate enough to live out here, you were basically on your own, apart from a building that still stands in the vast sand dunes behind the motel. It housed your only form of communication with the outside world. This place was the old telegraph station. Now, it's on the border between South Australia and Western Australia, and there's a reason for that. So let's say you were in South Australia in the 1890s and you cut your leg off. You'd get yourself to a telegraph station and the person there would send probably a kind of Morse code interpretation of what you wanted to say. That message would then come in here. That person would then hand it through a pigeonhole to another person who is in Western Australia on the other side, who would then communicate your message further down the line. So probably your message took about a week to get down to wherever it was going to get to. By that time, you were probably dead. But if you just look at this place, and you look at the surroundings and the location that it's in, hundreds of miles from anywhere, God, in the 1890s, you had to be pretty hardcore to live here. Back on the sofa, I really don't want this ride to end. This Harley is a quite incredible thing. I fell in love with it coming out of Sydney, but now I really think we should find ourselves a little garage together out here and settle down. Another 200 or so clicks rush by and lunch beckons. Amazingly, the Mundrabilla Bar and Roadhouse turns up right on cue. Rachel at the Nundrew wasn't exactly your archetypal Roadhouse manager, but Bruce certainly is.
Bruce, what the heck is that?
Recycling. I'm an anal recycler, mate.
Oh, that doesn't sound very good. Now, would you call that a full restoration of corrugated iron?
Yeah, she's a sort of a cross between a rainwater tank and a fence, I guess. She was a rollover, so we put a bit of a roof on, and then one day you wake up and look what you've done.
How long have you been there?
Nearly 12 years.
And has there been a lot of change in 12 years?
The traffic's changed. We've moved into this new group of people with a few bucks in their pocket. We got rid of all the retirees with no money. It's good for the local economy, which is me, mate. So we're all happy about that, eh?
And tell me, you're married, but if you're a single bloke here, just like it quite sort of,
You have a look at these backpackers moving around everywhere. If the average bloke couldn't get a hook up here and there, well, he's probably not really putting enough effort, I wouldn't have thought. For that few months when all the backpackers are doing their big moving and grooving thing, all in their little bongo vans, moving from one side to the other, I suppose as itchy as the average bloke does, I suppose the odd backpacker chick gets a bit itchy too, so I don't suppose it matters where it happens, does it? Whether it's in the bush or in the city.
I've seen quite a lot of loonies on the road. Yeah, like people who are bicycling it. Is that a normal thing?
There would be someone bicycling across here every day, near on.
Really?
Yeah. And pushing wheelie bins, and on rollerblades, and pushing dirty old washing machines with wheels on the bottom.
What? Washing machines?
Dirty old washing, well, that's all he ended up with out of his marriage, old boy was telling me. Bunged a set of wheels on her, put his goodies inside, and away he goes. And he whistled past her, yeah? Well, not whistled past, just sort of rumbled past, I guess. Just about every lunatic God shovel guts into rumbles past.
So a big ride this afternoon to my night stop in Kaiguna. It's another 300 or so kilometres down the track. Yet more heavenly cruising unfolds, only marred by the fact that I must buy another CD in Kaiguna, as even AC/DC's Back in Black is getting slightly repetitive. Soon enough though, the 300 clicks are done and I roll into Kaiguna.
I don't care what anyone says or what I look like. My hat saved my arse there, I reckon. Yeah, some does just get a chance to burn you straight in the eyes. It's having a baseball cap. I don't know what health and safety would say about it, but I don't care. Temperature-wise, just coming these last sort of 100 kilometres, I reckon it was about 12 degrees with a chill factor. So you are quite cold. But what a brilliant day, hey? What a brilliant day riding this country.
Next morning, I'm up and at 'em early to do the last remaining 375 kilometres to the little frontier town of Norseman and the end of our relative isolation. But before then, a real treat is in store. This is the longest continuous straight road in the world, some 90 miles without so much as the slightest kink or curve. This stretch of road is quite simply the definitive example of what it's like to ride a bike here. The concentration is unrelenting. If for one moment you let your mind wander, you could easily make a horrible mistake, or worse still, nod off.
Blimey, that's an experience I'll remember for a long time. I have to admit, even though I enjoyed every mile of it, that 90 miles straight, towards the end, the last 20 miles, my eyes start to water in me goggles, which I know is a sign of I'm getting tired, you know. Then I start yawning, and then I start looking down the freeway, and the heat haze, I'm not quite sure what's there, when at the start of the ride, oh no, that's a truck, you know, whatever. So you do get tired, whether you realise it or not. If you don't respect this landscape, and if you don't prepare yourself both mentally and physically, you can be in an awful lot of trouble. While riding through the American deserts, I met a guy in a ghost town who told me that he loved living in complete isolation, but like eating a huge tub of ice cream, you can have too much of a good thing, and he had to get out. If I was truthful, that's how I'm feeling. This ride has been life-changing, but I really could do with seeing a bit of life. But 100 kilometres down the road, my dream comes true, and I arrive in Norseman. Can't believe we made it. Oh, it's kind of a culture shock coming in here. Petrol stations and people and all that kind of stuff. 1,500 kilometres, of nothing, 3 days. And I guess it must be one of the biggest adventures or biggest rides you can have, kind of on tarmac, really. Just thinking about it coming in, and now having done it, I don't think it can be construed as a true wilderness, this ride, unless you have a problem. There are cars going up there all the time, and especially lots of people in caravans and retirees and all that kind of stuff who are only too pleased to help you. But if you do have a problem and you do break down or you get behind, so you're riding at night, that's when it becomes a wilderness. But either way, Norseman I've kind of dreamt of, and now it's a reality. Next morning, I wake up to civilization. Well, sort of. Now, millions of people wouldn't call this a town, but it is. I haven't seen a traffic light yet, but I've seen a huge amount of flies. The reason why this town got its name was because of this little Gigi. Now, this little horse was called Norseman, and it belonged to a gold prospector called Laurie Sinclair, who in 1894 turned up here to look for gold. He couldn't find any, but then he went back to his horse that was bored and scraping its hoof in the ground, and there, lo and behold, in the ground was a gold nugget. So consequently, it was this horse that really created the gold rush here in Norseman. Leaving Norseman behind, I have this feeling that Perth and the end of my epic journey is a stone's throw away. In fact, it's another 700 kilometres. The early gold prospectors were right. This land is rich in gold, and I'm heading some 160 clicks up to Kalgoorlie, the biggest mining town in the area. Outwardly, the riding and the landscape is slightly different, much redder in hue and peppered with wonderful eucalyptus trees. But it's inwardly that things have really changed. I feel more secure, more contented. Gone is the feeling of me versus the isolation and the hostility of the environment. I can relax in the knowledge that help is now only a few miles away if needed. Gold prospectors of the 1800s would perhaps tell them in their graves if they knew what the gold rush that they instigated now looked like in the Kalgoorlie of today. Well, I guess in the 1890s, Laurie Sinclair at Norseman, when he found that little ingot, had no idea what would happen some 120 years later. And I guess in the 1890s, you got your trowel and you dug your hole and you went for a bit of gold. Now, it's been taken to the extreme. This is Australia's largest open-pit gold mine. Known somewhat unaffectionately as the Super Pit, it's 3.5 kilometres long and 0.5 kilometre deep. It's so big that it can be clearly seen from space. From this pit, 28 tonnes of gold is extracted every year. If you wanted a symbol of capitalism, here it is, in all its gargantuan glory. It looks like a landscape from a movie like Total Recall. I find it a bit eerie and strangely macabre. It's funny how deep or what lengths we'll go to for materialism, really, isn't it? Probably a shining example of this crazy world that we live in. I mean, what are they going to do with it after they've finished? It's going to be a very deep lake. About 2 hours in Kalgoorlie is quite enough for me. This place reeks of avarice and alchemy, something that I really don't want to be a part of. If I did, I would have been a banker rather than a biker. Well, after a month on the road, this is it.
the last ride of 400 kilometres into Perth. The skies are getting darker though, giving an air of foreboding. Just when I thought I was free and clear, I have this horrible feeling that the extremes of this climate are conjuring up a very big finale. And sure enough, I'm hit by a massive hailstorm. The noise of the hail bouncing off my helmet is deafening, and my face feels like I'm being stung by 1,000 bees. If it wasn't for the Harley's fabulous fairing, I would have had to abort, but as I push on through, the storm relents, and fortunately the blue skies return. The ride into Perth is wonderful, not really because of the scenery, but because of the delicious warmth of the sun, and as I roll into town, a huge feeling of security and satisfaction engulfs me.
We're here. It's all finished. It was a bit of a culture shock coming in here, I've got to say. I don't think I've had a 3-lane carriageway to deal with since Sydney. The ride in wasn't brilliant the last 200 miles, but now the sun's come out, Perth looks rather lovely.
Well, what a city to finish this quite astonishing journey. On first impressions, Perth is absolutely beautiful, bathed in afternoon sunshine. Surfers proliferate, and holidaymakers like me parade the beach, strutting their stuff with an all-pervading air of contentment. Even though it's outwardly a vibrant and very modern city, beachside Perth seems serene, spacious and peaceful, a million miles away from the hostilities of the outback.
Well, Henry don't surf, so I can't really go much further. This is Scarborough Beach here in Perth. Not quite like the Scarborough I kind of know of. But anyway, look, it's obvious I've experienced a real adventure, but is crossing the whole of Australia truly a world's greatest motorcycle ride?
Well, definitely it is. Just like riding Route 66, Australia is one of those rides you quite simply have to do before you die. This country has everything: the scenery, the roads, the characters, and most importantly, the sheer adventure. But Australia also has the dangers, the wildlife, the daunting mileage, and the extreme hostility of the climate. To me though, that all adds to the fun. But as I ride this vast country, I realise what lies at the heart of biking in Australia, and that is the adventures to be found off the highway. Difficult to master on a Harley, but surely life-changing on the right bike.
So the acid test, I guess, is whether I'd do it again. Well, absolutely I would, but next time I'm doing it off-road.